Wrap-up of the United Auto Workers strike against the big three auto manufacturers means big things for the city of Belvidere. 23 News reporter Sydney Stoffregan talks to a union expert about what this means for the strength of labor unions and, more specifically, the Belvidere assembly plant, which was idled back in February.
I couldn't be happier. We're ecstatic here.
Just days after reaching a tentative agreement with Detroit's Big Three to increase worker wages, local auto workers look forward to reopening the Belvidere assembly plant. Northern Illinois University history professor Rosemary Fair says this is the first time a strike was successful in reopening a plant.
Here, a union and a strike has enabled those jobs to come back. And that's somewhat a signal of the potential of solidarity, the potential of what unions say is their purpose, which is to unite workers, to bargain for the common good.
More than 5 million square feet, the assembly plant is a huge asset to the city of Murals, an asset that many city leaders fought alongside workers to keep. Belvidere Mayor Clint Morris says the city has a great workforce that really cares for the community.
This is one of the things we've been known for. And to be able to keep it and to be successful, that's contagious. It opens up all kinds of other investment potential for the city. We've seen it even before this. I think it does give us more opportunity.
As for the future of UAW, Fair hopes this unprecedented event will light a fire for more labor unions to use the power of their voice to make change.
This is an auto workers union that changed its course by electing their own president and their own officers democratically. What can be achieved when more voices are heard.
That is Sydney Stoffregan reporting. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and other city leaders and state leaders indicate a new battery assembly facility will be coming to the Belvidere area as well as part of the deal there to produce electric vehicles at this Stellantis plant.